What fixation is being seriously underestimated these days? Gambling, it's everywhere. Every other commercial is about sports betting, and there's a little disclaimer they throw at the end that's barely audible. It's rampant, and casinos are being built everywhere. I'm not a prude, I don't care if people gamble, but the way it's being promoted is insanity as if it won't ruin a lot of lives. I know, right? The amount of people that just torch money sports gambling is crazy. Story 2. I don't know if it's a fixation, but the problem is we're always doing something. Every moment of our day is filled with something, and usually with a phone or PC or TV at the same time. Listening to music and or being on your phone while waiting or commuting. Too many options are available at all times, so you don't internalize things like, music. My theory is that you always have a lot of thoughts when you go to sleep or shower or have trouble reading something without wandering off, because that's the only time of the day you actually stop. Story 3. Pornography. Pornography provides the dopamine response you get from being with a partner without the corresponding effort. Slowly, this can lead to becoming more antisocial as it becomes an easily accessible source of gratification. It can also potentially cause problems like impotency, normalizing cruel, intimate behavior, and reducing people to mere objects. The most concerning aspects are that it is often consumed in secret, is free if you have an internet connection, has no visible short-term health effects, and the social taboo surrounding the topic makes it difficult to speak up about. Story 4. Just overconsumption in general. Influencers are saying, run, don't walk to buy this XYZ product. Or we see the Stanley Cup situations where people are lining up for a product. We see daily TJ Maxx hauls where people buy 5 of the same purse because it was only $29.99. Or consider those people who make incessant videos about being on the hunt for a gimmicky beaded bag and buying the other items they see first and don't need. There were content creators I had to block because that's all their content became. And then other people see it and think, wow, how fun, and then develop a fixation on the thrill of the hunt, potentially going into mountains of debt because they're being told everywhere that you absolutely need that item. It's exhausting. There are people dying of starvation in Gaza. Our landfills are already overflowing. Our thrift store prices are going up because people keep thrift flipping, making necessities inaccessible to people who actually rely on thrift stores to clothe themselves. Enough with buying unnecessary things already. Story 5. I couldn't seem to find this mentioned. Alcohol. Sure, we all know about alcoholism, but honestly, people just joke about it. When I was still on Facebook, I found silly images constantly about being an alcoholic like it was some badge of honor, and people still put a lot of pressure and shame others if they don't drink. Even on Reddit, when you suggest to someone they may need to look at themselves because they might be struggling with alcohol misuse, you get heavily downvoted. This happens even if you clarify you're not diagnosing them, just that they may want to introspect and take care of themselves. I say this as someone that experienced alcohol misuse and I didn't even get severe withdrawal symptoms when I stopped, if that tells you anything about how pervasive the issue is in our society. Story 6. Pornography and even excessive internet use in general can be highly detrimental. Excessive use of pornography specifically can totally uproot your whole life and damage your relationships. By suggesting that this behavior is normal, we've basically allowed countless people, both male and female, to become diminished versions of their former selves, potentially wasting a great deal of personal potential. I can definitely see speculative investing, like in cryptocurrency, leading to a similar fixation. I've gone through a period of that myself, although it's fortunate that it did more good than harm for me. Story 7. I'd probably say grass, as someone who lives in a country where it's legal. It may not be physically habit-forming, but it's certainly a mental fixation. I've tried to quit countless times, but always fall back into the habit. The longest I've lasted was about 2 weeks in the last 10 years. It's the only habit I've ever struggled with. I would like to stop since it's taking a toll on my physical and mental health because I can't control eating unhealthy foods while using it. Sober, I have no issue controlling my diet. Story 8. Screens, especially for young children, pose a noticeable issue. I have 2 nephews. One brother-in-law and sister-in-law really limit and monitor screen time, keeping it to 1 hour a day, maximum, often less. The other SIL sets no limits, and that nephew basically has the iPad all day. The difference between the 2 kids is astounding. The child with the lower screen time has a better attention span, enjoys playing with toys, activity books, and other children, and is very level-headed. The nephew with the non-stop iPad throws a temper tantrum anytime they don't get what they want, especially if you try to take the iPad away. They don't play well with toys on their own, have a very small attention span, are behind in school compared to the other nephew, and are also delayed in several other developmental areas by comparison. I know this is not entirely due to iPad usage versus no iPad usage, but I know it contributes and makes the issues worse. Story 9. Misuse is a significant issue. I know several people who have basically imploded their own lives because of a fixation on the substance. It's also extremely damaging to the body over time when used recreationally, at high levels, and with consistency. This qualifies as a fixation because each time those people have tried to take a break, They experience withdrawal symptoms for a week or longer. They've also told me things like they don't feel like themselves without the substance and can't talk to people without it. This was shared with me by extroverts who, prior to their fixation, definitely didn't need the substance to be their social selves, but have since become dependent on it. It's deeply concerning to watch people I love prioritize over fulfilling relationships in their lives. They also have a high potential to harm their internal organs due to their substance misuse. The substance often appears to be all fun and games and low impact at first, which is how each of these people got so wrapped up in it. It seemed like just a relatively harmless substance to have fun with, occasionally giving people more social energy, etc. And then this quickly evolved into, I'll just do a little bit more before going to the museum, or I'll just do a little bit before cleaning my house to make it more fun, which escalated into using it every weekend, all day, and eventually every day, all day, including while at work. It's become really insidious in my community. Story 10. I would say doom scrolling and excessive phone use. I actually didn't notice how much I was doing it myself until pretty recently. I took a job for one of my cleaning clients watching their dog overnight for about 13 nights, and I decided to use it as a chance to cleanse myself. I started reading a lot more at night and playing Monster Hunter Sim with my girlfriend, and between that and chores, I've been significantly happier. It's a night and day difference. But then I'll see my girlfriend and others around me do it to such an extent that I can't talk to them because they're buried in their phone. Another side effect I've noticed is that I can't just talk about anything I'm doing anymore because the instant I mention any interest of mine, all I get is, have you seen these 20 people that are doing the exact same thing as you but posting it online and making a bunch of money? Maybe you should watch them. It's just a hardcore fixation on social media, and it's diminishing people's ability to actually talk to one another at the very least while they are using it. Story 11. The fixation on productivity is a noticeable issue. I observe it in particular with Gen Xers, my parents, because they were raised by boomers who instilled the belief that you should always be working towards something. It's gone to the point where my mother won't go a day without deep cleaning something in the house or working on some other task even after her working hours are over, as if relaxation is some sort of detriment to a good life. It concerns me. I don't want to be a machine for the rest of my life just because we're functioning under a coercive high productivity system. I want myself and everyone else to experience peace. Story 12. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that society is still underestimating substance misuse, which is why coding rises every year due to counterproductive measures taken in bad faith. It's not just the people struggling with fixation on the street. Who here is taking care of family members whose pain was managed with substances years ago? How many of you had to watch what happens when their doctors perpetually lower their doses or even cut them off in the name of solving the substance epidemic, only to see your loved ones start self-medicating? I know I'm not the only one. The substance misuse and everything surrounding it is far from old news. The infuriating thing is that we have a proven solution, but I suspect the DEA has no interest in actually solving what has become a persistent issue for the agency. Story 13. Excessive internet use and gaming fixation can be extremely detrimental. It can ruin a relationship when one person almost never looks away from their screen. It can take a physical toll on the body due to the lack of exercise and strain on postures, eyes, hands, and neck. It diminishes your ability to manage your own thoughts. Personal responsibilities and hygiene sometimes fall to the wayside. People become disconnected from their local world and may struggle to function effectively in it. It can be awful, speaking as somebody who was close to a person struggling with a computer fixation. Story 14. Honestly, alcohol. I'm German, and here it has become such a socially accepted and often even required thing to drink. A few years ago, a self-experiment was released on YouTube about a woman who, quote, tried to not drink alcohol for a week. And it was genuinely strange to hear her talk about how everything suddenly seemed boring and how she basically didn't have anything to do. She didn't have anything to talk about with her friends because every time they met, they just went out drinking. And it felt like, if it weren't for the alcohol, those people couldn't even stand each other in the slightest. At the end of the experiment, she just started drinking again, having not learned a lesson. That video went viral for a bit and people made fun of it, but I genuinely just found it sad. I personally know a lot of people who couldn't function without drinking every day, but it's only ever taken seriously once those people are no longer able to function. When you hear high political figures here say things like beer isn't a substance or beer is just a food, it genuinely makes me angry, especially when they, in the same breath, demonize substances like grass, which is proven to be less toxic than alcohol. I'm not trying to speak for grass or other substances, I'm just saying it feels really hypocritical to me. Story 15. Politics. The emergence of the internet helped people get hooked on high-frequency political news almost daily, and it's hard to stop checking. I'm not saying people were passionate about politics before, but that depended on the context. Often, politics just weren't part of daily life for extended periods. What's changed is the frequency and presence. Now it's daily, everywhere, we can't escape it. And somehow, when we're cut off from political updates, we tend to become anxious about recent developments, so we quickly grab our phones, keyboards, or TVs. Story 16. The trend nowadays where people are getting diagnosed, perhaps accurately, as neurodivergent using AI is concerning. AI is often trained to be biased towards psychiatric labels such as personality disorders and will lean heavily into diagnosing ND features instead. This can be a good thing if the information is used correctly to seek help and support from a real human professional. However, claiming you're ND because an AI told you that you are diminishes the experiences of genuinely neurodivergent people. This opinion may make some people uncomfortable. Story 17. And similar products pose clear concerns. People love to say, we don't know the long term effects, but they're better than combustible cigarettes. Yes, we do know the right now effects. Is a major vasoconstrictor and causes a variety of issues related to blood circulation and wound healing. Just because it has fewer carcinogenic chemicals doesn't mean it has zero. That part, the true long term effects of those chemicals, we don't know, but I'm sure they aren't good. Story 18. Pornography is a complex issue, and I would have to say that I definitely underestimated its influence. I hadn't been in a relationship in years, and when I entered one and couldn't get fully stiff, I realized a few days later that I simply couldn't achieve and maintain a stiff without it. The surprising thing is that I never realized this was happening. I can go weeks without watching it, sometimes it's a daily habit, but it was always accompanied by pornography. So it seems more like I might have conditioned myself to become excited only with it rather than having a fixation. I don't know. I've since quit watching pornography completely, and I definitely feel moments where I want to watch it, but I'm still relatively early into quitting, so I'm hoping for the best. Story 19. I read through the thread, and all of the big ones are covered: gambling, pornography, phones, and social media. I don't think substances and alcohol are included in the underestimated category. Although out of these, I'd say pornography and gambling are probably the truly underestimated fixations. There's a ton of information out there about the dangers and proliferation of phones and social media. I like to add food. I think it's an underestimated and therefore totally untreated fixation. It may not be as widespread as the others, but it is very damaging. I know a young person who spends nearly their entire paycheck on junk food and DoorDash. They gained 60 pounds over 5 months during lockdown, having started at a healthy weight and then since have gone up over 300 pounds. They can describe eating and not even remember doing it. Fixation on food can also manifest in anorexia or bulimia. It's a different type of compulsion, but it is still food related. I think the use of medications like Ozempic will contribute to the issue. I have a person in my life who I can see has developed anorexia using the clinical definition, not the look skinny definition, while taking Ozempic. Story 20. Personally, I struggle with a fixation on phones, and I doubt I'm alone. I fully panic and turn around if I forget mine at home. I get secondhand anxiety thinking about schools taking them away from students in high school. It isn't good or healthy, but here I am. There are so many reasons for this fixation, but one I want to highlight is the constant breaking news cycle. There seems to be a crisis every 15 minutes, and I feel compelled to stay informed. Second is Afrin, the nasal spray. I had no idea it could be habit-forming when I started 15 years ago, and now I'm dependent on it. I gave up drinking and recreational substances easily when I had a child at 25 and never returned to them. But Afrin is a significant challenge. I'm glad the potential for dependence is more widely known now, but in case you don't know, avoid using it long term. Story 21. Main character syndrome involves the entitlement of believing, don't you know who I am? I have X number of followers on social media platform of choice. This often involves filming everything you do and every interaction you have and posting every thought that arises. There's also performative outrage used solely for clicks and interactions, especially content that features emotional distress. Furthermore, it includes the attempt to monetize all of this activity to fund a lifestyle that requires the individual to become more and more outrageous for people to stay engaged. Go to the beach and read a book. Story 22. For children, excessive tablet and screen usage is a serious concern. This can cause significant damage to their ability to concentrate, tolerate boredom, read, find other activities enjoyable, and may make them vulnerable to fixations and habit-forming behaviors in the future. The constant use overstimulates and can affect the structure of the cerebral cortex. It is a low-effort, high-reward activity, which makes everything else seem less appealing by comparison, even things they used to enjoy. Furthermore, years of this reward system, especially if you give them access to social media apps, creates neural pathways that resemble those seen in people with fixations, potentially making them predisposed to other dependencies later in life. Story 23. Ignorance. Yes, it is a type of fixation because otherwise, why would anyone just ask AI for answers, even though the AI researchers keep telling us that their own creation misrepresents information and is unreliable? Look, when someone is telling you that they are deeply flawed, they are very likely telling the truth, so we should take them seriously. These researchers are indirectly warning the public that AI is unreliable by saying AI misrepresents information, since they can't exactly go to their boss and say their flagship product is fundamentally flawed. They are scientists, not business people like their boss. Let's trust the science. Story 24. Social media is an intensely engaging tool that can become a fixation, often leading people to feel overly confident in their knowledge and the beliefs. It utilizes the same reward centers in the brain as other dependencies that can diminish a person's ability to experience joy. Users are constantly chasing the next engaging piece of content or interaction. Real life often isn't as interesting, and now real life situations are becoming more extreme in an attempt to compete with the internet for attention. While it's not a substance in the typical sense, it appears to have very similar behavioral and psychological effects. Story 25. Fixation itself is arguably the most underestimated aspect of substance and behavioral misuse. People genuinely do not realize the extent of this psychological state. It is not simply a disorder or an illness, it is a permanent change in your psychology that can be triggered in any environment. It's your brain forming a core belief about how to navigate the world, and you are following along. For instance, it believes a particular substance or behavior will bring happiness. No matter how much you consciously know it won't, your brain has already constructed the same logical framework that tells you fire is hot, so don't touch it. It's an automated understanding, similar to how you can't truly convince yourself the ground is water. Because guess what? In that moment of suffering, indulging in the fixation does provide temporary relief. Talk to anyone who has struggled with this, they miss the feeling constantly. You can't emotionally manipulate your brain and say, this isn't good for you, when you enjoy the temporary relief every single time. You can't simply use positive thinking to resolve it. You can't convince yourself out of it. You can't control it. You need to meticulously break that framework by consistently showing your brain that life is actually fine and livable without the fixation. This requires repetition until your psychological state is back in sync. Story 26. Kratom. I don't think it's the biggest issue, but its use is definitely out of control and it should be illegal everywhere. It was pitched to me as a natural supplement that could help my migraines. Now I'm struggling with a full-blown fixation and feel like I don't know how to stop the downward spiral. I take accountability, but I am just so angry about how it's marketed. I've never struggled with a substance fixation before in my life, but this is widely accessible. It acts like an opiate. I'm facing a significant personal struggle, but I know it's not just me because it's sold at every gas station and smoke shop around. Story 27. I'm going to go with excessive phone use, even though it is talked about plenty. I still think its dangers are underestimated. It's pretty much the perfect compulsion. It keeps you engaged without overly debilitating you. There is no risk of coding. And the way it affects your life is the aggregate of subtle and some not so subtle shifts away from motivation, self-care, focus, and drive. Over time, you can begin to feel like nothing else outside of it quite matters the way it used to, and you want to spend as much time engaged with the device as you can. It's a bit like a malware. Any stronger, and it would disable the user before it could spread. Any weaker, and the user would shrug it off. But that Goldilocks zone of just engaging enough, just compulsive enough, that's a dangerous place to be. Especially because at any given point along the way, it will never feel like it is that serious. Any given scroll will only ever feel like the last one, pretty much. There's no dramatic rock bottom inflection point, just endless stringing along while you lose small bits of yourself along the way. Story 28. My education is in nursing and my job experience includes working as a nurse, serving on active duty as an Army MP for 8.5 years, and working as a flight attendant. I know what working for a living is all about. Nothing was handed to me or anyone in my family. We grew up rural and didn't have much. I paid my way through school while working. We bought our first home at 33 years old, and I tell you, we lived paycheck to paycheck for the majority of our lives. We are, at best, lower middle class. We are not preoccupied with being angry at the world for our own shortcomings or woulda, coulda, shouldas. And if you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos just like this. Story 29. On-demand entertainment and video games are a growing concern. The number of people who think it's normal to spend nearly every waking moment absorbed in virtual worlds and who get upset when you question the amount of time they dedicate to their quote-unquote hobby and quote-unquote relaxing is frankly alarming. I worry that in 20 years we won't have enough people with mid-level hands-on skills because so many people are focused solely on their primary job and gaming. I love gaming. I play big RPGs. I also love good film, hands-on crafts, languages, and read voraciously. I limit my gaming time, which allows me to maintain a full life and keep developing new skills and knowledge, exposing me to new ideas and points of view. As far as avid gamers go, I seem to be in the minority these days. Story 30. Caffeine, sugar, just try abstaining to see how difficult it can be. Alcohol, the phrasing, oh, I only have 2 beers a day, that doesn't make me an alcoholic, misses the point. You may still have a dependence. Try going sober for a month if you don't believe me, it's often very challenging. Can you drink nothing but water for a month? No alcohol, no sweet drinks, no coffee? Dopamine-driven activities, your phone, Instagram, YouTube, video games, etc., pornography, gambling, sports bets, roulette, trading, especially high-risk activities like leverage and options, it's best to stay away from these. Basically, anything the lack of makes you agitated or anything you find yourself making excuses to get. Can you give up all of the above? Story 31. I feel really sorry for this younger generation that has access to betting apps, easy credit, and all of the marketing and manipulation that motivates them to risk money on games. I'm 54 years old and I genuinely enjoy sports betting. Back in my day, you'd have to look up the lines in the newspaper and then contact the local bookmaker, usually a friend of a friend, place a bet, and then pay or get paid out once a week in person. I've joined one of these online betting platforms and they literally call me by phone several times a week to encourage me to bet more. They offer me all these bonuses and incentives. It's all linked to my credit card. That is a dangerous situation. Story 32. Excessive video game use is a serious concern. It's something people have a knee-jerk reaction to, disregard solely because older generations strongly objected to it for the last few decades. But my wife works as a youth psychologist. The number of teenage boys she knows who quite literally spend almost all of their free time gaming is alarming. They disregard socializing, school, hobbies, all for gaming. Something which was maybe 5 to 10% of teen boys in the 2000s is now easily 40 to 50%. And it would be one thing if this was acknowledged as a problem, but it's not really. These boys see nothing wrong with it because most of their friends are the same way. A negative habit becoming widespread is a problem, but it escalates once it hits a point where it becomes normalized. Story 33. Have you ever heard of a dependence on nasal decongestant spray, the non-saline kind? I hadn't either until I was 12 and already dependent. It seems harmless, especially where I live, and over-the-counter medication with no significant warning attached aside from the pharmacist recommending a short duration of use advertised everywhere. However, prolonged use damages your nasal tissue to the point where you can't smell anymore and can even cause your nose to emit unpleasant odors. Not many people where I live know it can be dependency forming, and not many people like to admit they are dependent because it seems like a harmless thing. It feels embarrassing to be dependent on that of all things, but it's a real issue that should be discussed more. It's also surprisingly hard to stop using because if you don't take it, your nose feels clogged and it starts to feel like you can't breathe. Either you go cold turkey and endure that feeling, or you start to dilute your spray with saline little by little until it's only saline you're spraying up your nose. It takes so long. Story 34. The news? People really need to disengage from online drama. You shouldn't be living and breathing Trump's every move. It's quite consuming to know his every footstep. I don't really like the man either, but you're going to put significant stress on yourself if all you think about are things you can't influence or change and then get outraged by them. What are you realistically going to do about it? You're only one person. The whole system is flawed anyway. They don't care about you, only your money. Go spend some time with your family or pet your dog or go watch some anime or read some manga and calm down. It's really not that serious, or at least it shouldn't be. Story 35. ChatGPT, Copilot, or whatever your preferred tool is enabling a problematic reliance. People would rather just ask ChatGPT for something instead of doing the research themselves because ChatGPT gives a summary of the most factual results anyway. The days of people critically thinking for themselves are being undermined. Too many people are plugging every thought they have into ChatGPT so they don't have to do any mental effort. Story 36. Does the need for constant stimulation count? I know so many people that cannot fathom the thought of just not being on their phone or watching TV or needing something to occupy their mind. Meanwhile, I know I use Reddit and Instagram for reels, but when I go for a walk or just sit outside and take in the sun, I don't need it. I just like to live in the moment. However, so many people would be bored by that unless there's some form of low-effort, engaging stimulation happening to keep them entertained. This extends to excessive social media use and things of that nature where you can't enjoy the life around you because you're too busy being invested in the lives of people everywhere else. Story 37. The fixation on avoiding boredom is a pervasive issue. By extension, this is a fixation on the internet and all the content meant to entertain us. This trend is damaging our societies, corrupting critical thinking and skewing our world for the worse. I keep strict parental controls on my devices to make certain apps entirely unavailable to me or only usable when necessary, like tools. The fact that this approach is seen as radical speaks volumes about the lack of awareness regarding this problem. Even a single day of having apps blocked that I otherwise used occasionally leaves me with ideas, thoughts, and plans about my life that I had been lacking. It's like the world is stuck in a deep trance, lives on pause, entirely entertained and missing the essential boredom that prompts you to make a life for yourself. The change needed to unplug is a lot more complex than teaching someone about responsible internet use or monitoring screen time. This content is specifically designed to manipulate the reward circuits in our brains. Entire companies optimize for this, and you can be certain they've succeeded. The only refuge is to quit, block, and change your environment so you can begin living your life again. I wish there was a more common approach. You wouldn't tell a person struggling with alcohol misuse to moderate their drinking. You'd tell them to stop buying it. Story 38. Food, constant snacking, and sugar are definite concerns. Overeating has become not only normalized, but often encouraged depending on the setting. I am not saying we should monitor people's weight or what they eat, but rather that we shouldn't make a fuss about what people are or aren't consuming. I work at a place where I'm constantly being asked what I'm eating for lunch. If I'm not eating a full, square meal, I get questioned as to why. If I politely turn down an inexpensive dessert, I get treated as if I'm being aloof. It's no one's business. If a person turns down a slice of cake, it doesn't mean they're aloof or even on a diet. Maybe they don't like cake, or maybe they have cake at home. If I have a small snack during lunch hour, it doesn't mean I'm starving myself. It means I know my body and I will feel sluggish and unwell if I, a 5'4" woman with a desk job, eat 3 big meals per day plus snacks and desserts. Story 39. Honestly, I believe use is still widely underestimated. Despite so many in my generation, Generation Z being very educated on the dangers, many still smoke and even more vape. Where the general education falls short is in explaining that destabilizes the nervous system and artificially stimulates the release of dopamine, the good job, keep going neurotransmitter. Every time you reinforce the need for this external stimulation until a chemical dependence fully sets in. It essentially drains your body's natural motivation reserves without replenishing them. You pay the cost of that depletion every time you use it. I can't help but feel that if more people understood how substances actually work and their biochemical effects, the world would be a much less chaotic and overprescribed place. Story 40. The fixation on right-wing media has significantly changed my father. He's a different person than he was 3 years ago, partly because his health has declined and he spends every day watching Fox News. He recently told me that billionaires shouldn't pay any more taxes than someone who makes $20,000 a year, as in the state of Montana. Apparently, he believes they deserve lower taxes because they're the ones providing people with jobs. I know, it's a baffling view, considering he has never been wealthy himself. Beyond that, there's the adoption of racially biased views and what I call Christian theatrics, but the billionaire viewpoint for some reason seems the hardest to grasp. The constant fear-based reporting has led to discriminatory beliefs against immigrants. Furthermore, his personal mix of Christian beliefs and nationalism has created the view that even though scripture says taking a life is wrong, America's enemies need to be punished. He even suggested it's righteous in God's eyes for the government to take extreme punitive action against adversaries. I missed a man who claimed to be Republican but on paper held mostly entirely Democratic views. He wasn't necessarily smarter, but at least he was easier to reason with. Story 41. So far, none of these comments seem truly overlooked. They are pretty regularly brought up in conversation on the topic. I would argue that we are fixed on arguing online. The anonymity that comes with the internet has definitely resulted in some people craving starting conflicts online. And I suppose to each of their own, the internet offers broader opportunities in that sense. I just feel like we never really acknowledged for younger generations that some media literacy was supposed to be taught, including the pitfalls you need to learn to avoid when navigating cyberspace. Aside for some lukewarm attempts in the 90s and early 2000s, online etiquette has been quite apathetic to say the least. People forget there's a person, a human being, that probably has more in common than not with you on the other side of that message. Story 42. A growing concern is rage. Rage bait is everywhere and it works. On social media, it keeps us engaged so companies can profit from our attention. In politics, it keeps us angry at each other so that politicians can pursue their agendas while we're distracted. In other words, rage makes us unwise. It may feel satisfying, but it makes us incredibly easy to manipulate. So don't click the rage bait and don't take your eyes off the real issues to rage at sensationalized groups or political stereotypes. Most of us need every ounce of intelligence we have to thrive in this world. Story 43. Alcohol. It took getting sober for me to realize just how much and how often people drink in this country, the US. It's concerning enough that people look at you strangely for not drinking. It's quite baffling to me. We're all very aware of alcoholism, but most people are unaware of their own potential dependence because society acts like it's perfectly fine. I'm not saying all alcohol is bad, just that because our culture is so centered around drinking, it's easy to not recognize that you have a problem. Basically, my opinion is that people have a dependence, but no one is telling them that they have a problem, so they think they're fine. It's entirely possible to have issues with alcohol without meeting the criteria for what most people consider an quote-unquote alcoholic. Maybe it's not the most overlooked issue, but it's definitely somewhat overlooked. Story 44. I don't know if this will cause some disagreement, but to me, eating out looks more and more like a fixation. It relates to multiple fixations mentioned in other comments, debt, compulsive buying, etc., but it's a specific issue on its own, in my opinion. So, in the Western world, eating out is generally so expensive that it should be viewed as a luxury if done anything more than occasionally. Unless there's a special occasion or there's a clear utility in doing so, i.e. meal preparation is not an option, eating out is financially disastrous for anyone from the upper middle class and below. I've been with so many coworkers who are in worse financial condition than me, spending hundreds of dollars per month on takeout and Uber Eats without any second thoughts. I include frequent coffee purchases in this pattern of consumption, as for a lot of people, this is a daily occurrence. I also have so many friends who are unable to conceive that friends can, in fact, meet outside of restaurants. Story 45. Loot boxes are a major concern. I work in retail and we sell physical loot boxes marketed to children. We have an entire category devoted to it, and it's our biggest area of growth in toys. It's essentially gambling for kids. Some of these items cost $40, $50, or even $60. We sell ones for Disney movies that are $20 for a 2-inch figure. The figure doesn't even move or light up. It's basically a 2-inch Funko Pop for $20, but it's a loot box, so the contents are random. Each set typically has 9 or 10 different figures. This means customers spend around $100 on average to get the one they want. Furthermore, some sets feature a mystery final figurine that requires the assembly of pieces found across all the other boxes. This quote-unquote good one is usually a highly desirable character. For example, Elsa from Frozen or Iron Man from Marvel. This type of random reward can be compelling even for adults and has negatively impacted the video game industry in my opinion. Now they're marketing it directly to children. They're essentially being set up to waste money on microtransactions when they get older, if not outright gambling. Story 46. Fixation on online validation is a highly problematic issue because when people become so focused on earning affirmation online, they tend to engage in risky behaviors they never would have otherwise considered. Let's take the classic example of online personalities who attempt extremely dangerous and reckless stunts. There have been instances, such as the one where participants built a pyramid using random objects and then climbed to the top. This resulted in numerous injuries, sometimes severe, when participants fell from the unsecured structure. There's also the infamous Tide Pod challenge, where people intentionally ingested the product. Sometimes, instead of just doing reckless things, people actually engage in aggressive actions. For example, there are online personalities who would sneak up behind people and then hit them without provocation. This has led to severe injuries and, in some tragic cases, fatalities. Occasionally, the person making the video antagonizes an entire neighborhood or country, resulting in them being apprehended, arrested, or, if they're in a foreign country, deported, as happened to one individual who caused public disorder in Japan. The quest for online validation doesn't only lead to people attempting risky stunts. Sometimes people end up becoming part of a group or a political movement just so they can feel like they belong somewhere, even if they don't truly believe in the group's ideology. These are the people who can't even articulate why they joined a group or why they support a certain cause. All they care about is being validated for being part of a group, so they simply parrot whatever that group says. They give up their ability to think and make decisions for themselves, following whatever they are told, all for the sake of being validated. Story 47. Sugars, particularly corn syrup, are added to far more American food products than in other countries. The obesity epidemic has likely to do with being sedentary or simply overeating, and more to do with the fact that many Americans can't easily get healthy, affordable food. Yes, vegetables, fruits, etc. are all available in grocery stores. However, try finding healthy, affordable restaurants or processed and packaged goods that don't have excessive sugar added. Dealing with the epidemic is relatively straightforward. Limit the use of corn syrup to mere fractions of the current amount allowed, if at all. Unfortunately, the system of corn-based crops in most of America will have to change, and the government needs to stop providing subsidies to farmers. Then regulation should cut the allowable sugar content in foods. Sugar should have a prominent warning on the front of packages, just as gluten-free or other health issues require front-of-package labeling. When consumers see a recommendation that a single serving provides 80% of their daily suggested sugar intake right up front, they will likely stop buying that product. Story 48. Escapism is by far the most overlooked fixation, encompassing all common maladaptive coping mechanisms such as doom scrolling, gambling, excessive shopping, video games, streaming, substance misuse, and adult content. All of these activities are high-inducing dopamine behaviors that temporarily suppress negative emotions and allow people to escape from whatever bad feelings they're experiencing. The problem is that the suppression of negative emotions only lasts a short while, and then the negative emotions return. People repeatedly turn to these behaviors because they provide temporary relief, creating a cycle where they never truly deal with their underlying feelings. Men, especially in today's society, can be especially troublesome or emotionally unaware. They quite literally have no experience in communicating their feelings, even to themselves. What we really need to teach people, and especially kids, is emotional regulation. People need to learn to deal with their negative feelings without lashing out in aggression or withdrawing entirely. For all its glory, technological convenience is also a key problem in today's society for allowing people to escape for most of the day, meaning they never address their problems. They are, in other words, completely stuck running on the same perpetual cycle every day. Story 49. Honestly, I'd say excessive digital device use is one of the most overlooked fixations today. Think about how much time we spend connected to our phones, especially with social media. It's quite remarkable. Jonathan Haidt discusses how today's highly digitalized world has led to a massive distraction and disconnection from real life. We're so focused on what's happening online that we're losing the ability to just be present in the moment. That's a huge part of mindfulness, just being there, fully aware. But instead, we're constantly scrolling or checking notifications and not truly living in the moment. This leads to people feeling disconnected from everything around them, like they're physically present but not truly engaged. And the more we're plugged into the digital world, the more we can start to feel lonely and isolated, even when we're technically quote unquote connected to others. It's surprising that something meant to bring us together can make us feel so apart. Hate and other researchers link this kind of fixation to rising rates of anxiety and depression. When you're constantly comparing yourself to filtered versions of other people's lives, you can start to feel like you're never really good enough. The most difficult part is that it's designed to be compelling. You get these little surges of dopamine from likes and comments and notifications, but over time, that just strains your mental health even more. It's like we're chasing validation through screens, which just pulls us further away from finding any sort of inner peace or emotional balance. If more people practice mindfulness and actually focused on being in the present instead of living through a screen, we'd probably be a lot happier and less stressed. It's not easy, though. This digital fixation is real and it impacts a lot more people than we realize. Story 50. Pseudo-social interaction is a significant underlying issue. We talk about excessive screen use and social media fixation, but the core problem is that people are having their social needs fulfilled in a way, well, that doesn't actually include genuine interaction with others. It's like often interacting with some form of AI or with people they will never meet, so they don't feel any kind of authentic consequence, positive or negative, to their interactions. The 2020 lockdown amplified that trend because it became the norm instead of the exception. Now we end up with a high volume of posts on Reddit that are asking about really basic social interactions, such as, how do I say hello to my neighbor? Story 51. Buzzwords in the corporate world: holistic, leverage, transparency, validation, fire drill, parking lot, keep me honest, synergize, etc. Now, here's a novel idea. If you don't know something, just say that. Don't ask someone else to keep you honest. Quote unquote, keep me honest is a fancy term for asking someone to check your information. And trust me, if everyone was taking a holistic approach to the business, we wouldn't have to rush to address certain issues as frequently as we do. Buzzwords and phrases make people think their message is incredibly sophisticated and precise. It's not. Our communication is often ineffective, which is why we frequently need conference calls instead of relying on email. This type of language is widespread, and I'm not sure people in corporate America realize just how formulaic their communication has become. Story 52. It's absolutely baffling to me that nobody has mentioned fixation on food. I'm quite aware that it doesn't currently meet the clinical criteria for fixation, but it is very real and many people suffer from it without even knowing. If you've ever had the thought that you simply couldn't live the rest of your life without a certain highly palatable food, you may have developed a fixation on food. If you struggle to refuse fast food on the drive home and seek food for comfort, you may have developed a food fixation. If your priority when selecting foods to eat is the sensory pleasure you receive from it above anything else, you might have developed a food fixation. Obesity is so prevalent in Western societies due to food fixations, and the companies that perpetuate these behaviors do a phenomenal job covering up their own liability and making the rest of the world believe it's not a serious issue. If you feel personally challenged by this, that's useful. It may mean you are struggling with this behavior, and this could serve as your wake-up call. Story 53. Honestly, I think excessive gaming is one of the underestimated issues, and not just playing games, but everything surrounding it. I've commented on this before, but I used to spend around 6 to 8 hours per day gaming. I work from home and happen to be quite competent at my job, so I find hours throughout the day to do what I want. I was putting half my workday into gaming and occupying Discord all day, and then finding myself exhausted when my partner came home and being unable to spend quality time with her. I also wouldn't do things like meet her after work because I was in a game, and I'd respond to messages from friends asking if I was online quicker than I'd respond to her. We broke up a few months ago. She doesn't cite that as a reason, but I know that my energy was so consumed by the games that it contributed to the other issues which led to the breakup. I now average probably a couple of hours per week on games, if that. And if any of these stories got to you too, here's more for you. YouTube thinks we're going to love this. I'll catch you in that video.